Hey everyone, this is Shahriar, and today I'm talking to Jossalyn. I met her briefly in while I was traveling in Japan, and we did a photo shoot. But I just want to know more about what's happening in her life and how things are on her end. So hi Jossalyn, how are you today?
Hi, good. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to start this interview.
Awesome. So I know you've been modeling for a while, in different countries even. How did you exactly get started?
Oh, that's a good question. First, my grandma and my mother were models, and I was really inspired that they were able to do this career. And so I became a model when I was about 12 years old. I went to a modeling school. It was just kind of training. It was fun. It was not really any serious model work. And then after that, I really started actually modeling when I was 19. Pretty much inspired from my whole family.
Got it. What did that schooling kind of entail? Like being more comfortable in front of the camera, or what was it all about?
It was actually really informative. There was aspects of acting, so like commercial and how to act. They had like beauty courses of how to do like basic makeup, hair, nails. They had runway training as well. That was really fun. But like now that I think back, it's kind of outdated runway compared to actual modeling. It felt more like pageantry kind of style. But they had like a wide aspect of that. Unfortunately, there was no on-camera training. We only had like one photo shoot at the very end of our graduation. So unfortunately, that was too bad. Actually, in truth, I probably wouldn't have done it. Like if I went back in time, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just leapt straight into the actual modeling market.
Got it. That makes sense. But I also feel like since it was catered towards like a younger person, some of that perhaps, makes more sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So how is modeling in Japan compared to the US? Because you've been living in Japan for a number of years now, right?
Oh yeah, I've been living here for about I think 6 years, and then I used to model in the States as well. They're actually completely different. So in America, you have of course, the freelance modeling and agency modeling. There, I had an agent, but in Japan, I have a freelance agent. And the reason I have a freelance agent here is because of the age restriction. They're not as, I don't know what you'd call it, they're not as lenient towards having older models. Like, for example, if you're around the age of 25 to 23, that's the cutoff limit for Japan. While in the States, they have a variety of like, oh, 30s, 40s. Now they have 50s, 60s, 70s-year-old models in the market, which is great.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't really realize that about Japan. And that applies to local as well as foreign models. Everyone has to kind of conform within that age limit.
I'm not sure for if you're native Japanese. I haven't really gone into that market. They tend to keep the foreign agencies separate from
Okay,
the native ones, so I'm not sure about those. But for foreigners, yes, that is definitely true.
got it. That makes sense, I suppose. Different clientele, different needs.
Yeah, yeah.
And did you start modeling right after you got to Japan, or is it something that you kind of leaned into, or did your agent reach out to you for a step, or how did that start?
Oh, that's a really good question. When I first came to Japan, I had just a different visa, so I could not do modeling. So I was kind of like disappointed in that. And it was really weird, but not weird, but amazing. I met a photographer randomly in a park, and I kind of did a little bit of modeling for his wedding kimono business. And then after that, like a few more modeling jobs picked up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could really do this. Unfortunately, they weren't paid because of the visa. So I asked my company about the proper visa. And then from there, I just was like, I'm going to do it again because I don't know, it's just something you can't stop.
Yeah. To be fair, also also met in a park. Not random.
Yeah.
It was more arranged, but yeah, that is something that did happen. Um, so I also did want to ask you about the types of shoots that you do. I've seen your portfolio where you've done commercial shoots as well as like fashion runway shoots. Um, what is the difference between that, like in terms of you know, getting chosen for it or photographers reaching out to you?
Oh yeah, so each job is completely different. A lot of the high-end commercials come through my agency, but also through Instagram as well. So Instagram is a great platform for developing a portfolio and being contacted by clients too.
Hmm.
The difference between like the commercial ones and the what would you say, like the studio ones, right?
Yes, fashion.
Like the fashion ones, that's
Yeah.
true. So the commercial ones are very well thought out. There's a schedule. Pretty much each pose is thought of and has like a mood board of like you're going to do this pose, that pose, and this pose, and nothing else.
Got
So
it.
there's a lot less room for creativity. Whereas in fashion, you know, you and the photographer get there, you're in the clothes and makeup, and they're like, let's see what we can do. Let's push the limits of posing and angles and you know, going
Yeah.
crazy, but not too crazy.
Um, I, I also I believe you've also done runway quite a bit in Japan. Is that through your agent or how did those work out?
Yeah, so the runway ones I was contacted through Instagram. There is a lot of college students looking to hire models for their runway, which is
Yeah.
really fantastic. I was actually surprised that for Fashion Week, the Tokyo, you know, the big one, everyone talks about it, they don't pay the models. So I actually rejected doing that twice because I believe as a model, you're doing the audition, you're doing the fitting, you're doing the actual show, which there's two shows, and that's a full 8 hour days of not getting any pay. So I do understand there's the label of having that runway under your resume, but in the end, you do need to get paid for how hard you are working. I believe that's a little bit more fair for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not different from internships in the corporate world, where like they
Yeah,
believe the exposure is payment enough, and I do believe it's not fair. You should absolutely get compensated for your work.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
Also, I believe you are a photographer too. What type of images do you normally shoot, and what got you started on that?
Yes, the photography, I'm still learning. There's so much to learn with that. But what got me started is when I was doing the photo shoots of like being a model, it was just really exciting to see all these creative concepts be put together. And I had so many ideas in my mind, but you know, of course, a different photographer will have a different idea for that concept. So I
Mhm.
wanted the freedom to express my concept in photography. So that's kind of what got me started on trying photography. Still a hobby for me right now.
Well, that's fair, but like, do you feel like
Yeah.
do you like setting things up and executing a concept, or do you just perhaps go out into nature and see what nature has to offer? How do you kind of approach that?
Oh yeah. So for me, if it's nature, so nature, I just go into the woods and start snapping shots like a crazy person. I love nature. So like anything green, anything beautiful, just take it. But I think for more of a kind of, what would that be, like a portrait? I really like to first think of a story. Like I feel like each session has to have a story. And I really like to draw out people's natural beauties. So I feel like you don't need a lot of like extreme hair and makeup and clothes. Of course, I love those concepts, but for my photography, I want to kind of bring out the person's personality through the photos. So like less hair, less makeup, wardrobe simple, and
Hmm.
then just put them into a story and see how they react.
That's very interesting. So there is a creative process behind it, in terms of like thinking up that story and how you're going to execute it. Do you feel like it has changed quite a bit over the years, or how do you see yourself changing in that regard?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with location, like having access to certain places. So I don't have a lot of access to nature in Japan, or it's very limited to where you can shoot freely without a permit. So I feel like that does kind of restrict my creativity, which is fine. I understand, of
Mhm.
course, they don't want people trampling the whole forest to take the video. So I'm respectful of that, of course, whichever country you're in, please be respectful of those rules.
Of course.
And also another thing is budget for fashion and wardrobe. So if you don't have access to a stylist or to wardrobe, you kind of have to like dig in your own closet or dig in like the model's closet and see what kind of story you can produce from there. So if I could make my dream style would be, I would love to shoot gothic. I love dark, moody, kind of sad pictures, lots of black and whites. I think that would be my style for the next time.
Very interesting. Japan does have castles. Um, there are a lot of like structures that could potentially fit that role. So, I look forward to seeing those images.
Thank you.
I also did want to ask about, tips for folks who are, dabbling in modeling. When you got started, or rather restarted, perhaps in Japan, did you find a particular medium was helpful, say books or YouTube or workshops for your personal growth? Or, did you just start and the experience kind of built up on that? And was that how you proceeded?
Those are good questions. So I would say for a model and a beginner model, of course, build your media platform. Don't wait for an agent to find you or for an agent to accept you. First, build your platform. You can use I use Instagram. Facebook for me wasn't as successful, but it does work for some people.
Hmm.
People use Twitter. I don't use it. That didn't work either for me. That was a really
Right.
hard one. I do suggest Model Mayhem is a really good way to meet photographers who are traveling in and out of Japan. Maybe they're searching for a model and they need someone and you're on there. So I get a lot of clients searching through Model Mayhem as well. It just depends on what kind of modeling you want to do. After that, let's see. So those are the medias. Oh yeah, so if you want to come to Japan as a model, you'll need your visa, of course. That's the first step, getting that visa approval. And then from there, you can apply for the regular agencies. I always suggest go for it, no matter if there's limitations, just put your name out there, put your face out there, and don't wait for them to accept you.
Right. Of
Just
course.
move on to building your career, of course. And then freelance agents, they're honestly probably the better deal to getting into the door of modeling and being able to get yourself established with higher end brands.
Hmm.
But that being said, because this is Japan's rule of every agency that I've applied for, they take at least 50% of whatever you make, which is not really a good thing for modeling. Usually it's supposed to be 10 to 20 is
Right.
the average business, but 50 for me is a little too much, I think, on that aspect, unfortunately. But you're in a different country, so you live by their rules, of course.
That is very true. 50% does seem very high, but yeah, as you said, each country kind of handles it differently. Are you looking to branch out to like other nearby countries as well while we're in the topic of that? Like
Yeah,
Korea or Thailand or um, China even?
that's a really good question. So I actually just recently reached out for Korea. I applied to over, I think, 30 agencies there,
Okay.
and it has been a no-go.
Yeah.
So in Japan is strict, but Korea is stricter. So, and China, the strictest. So I am not going to apply to China. I have applied to Korea, so that was one of my goals, is just getting out there, doing it, and seeing what happens. I think for me, Taiwan probably won't happen either. I'm going to go back probably to America and apply for New York instead. So I
Nice.
feel like with the American agencies, they're really opening up to being flexible, about age or height, weight. Pretty much every category is very like becoming so much more diverse, and I'm really excited for that aspect of like still having my career even in my 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way up until the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you feel like it wasn't your skill, or any of that, your looks that got you disqualified? Was it just your age?
Just the number, yep. As soon as you put your age down, nope, instantly turned away. They don't care like how old you look or anything like that. They always say, oh, like you're just too old, sorry. Like you don't reach the number limit. And that's unfortunate for them. I think in the long run, it makes sense. That's how they're gonna cast all of their models to be super young. But they do have to realize that the world is changing and not everybody is gonna have like a 12-year-old posing like for makeup. Like we want to see variety. Like how do older women look wearing makeup? Why is it only someone with like buttery smooth skin at 12? I'm like, should she be wearing makeup at 12? I don't know. So yeah, unfortunately, it's numbers is what counts in Korea.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Also, like for people that do get started a little late, like not 12, but say, 20, for example, it does take years to perfect a craft, like any craft. So it almost seems like by the time they're actually experienced, they are aging out of the profession, which doesn't sound fair.
Pretty much, yeah. If you think about it, if you're 20, that leaves you 3 years of modeling.
Right.
That's not much time. It takes about a year to develop a strong portfolio and to be able to know like just how to work your angles or being on shoots and commercials. It just takes a long time. You can't, gain a career like that overnight. I mean, of course, some people can because of media, but otherwise, like the experience, like you said, you need more time. And I think that's really important for models to be able to deliver their best skills.
Absolutely. Like even in terms of, say, a makeup artist or a photographer, I feel like I've been shooting for about 8 years, and there are many things that I still don't know, and I look forward to learning more about those, right? So it's a process that we go through. So again, I'm not there, but capping it at a certain age just seems really unfair to everyone involved. So
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
I
And
also
that's
did.
not even including. Hmm.
Sorry.
Oh no, I was just thinking like that doesn't include measurement restrictions. We won't go there about Korea's measurement restrictions.
Yeah. In terms of new models entering the profession, um, what are some of the difficulties that they might face, and how could they overcome some of that?
Oh, that's a good question. So for if you're just beginning as a model, a lot of the difficulties will be first starting out or knowing where to start. So I highly suggest, of course, starting your social platform, keeping your information private. So decide whether or not you're going to use a stage name for
Mhm.
privacy reasons. So that's also important, just kind of pretty much keeping as much information about yourself off the internet, that'll keep you safe. A huge thing for me is safety first. Always think about safety no matter what you're doing. If you're applying for a test shoot or visiting an agency, always think of your safety when it comes to that, especially if you're going to be working overseas. Then definitely always be like aware of scams. There's lots of scamming or other bad things that could possibly happen. So social media, safety. From there, applying for agencies and freelance agencies, kind
Mhm.
of get that ball rolling in that direction. And from there, go ahead and sign up or contact photographers for a test shoot and kind of build up your portfolio. But you shouldn't pay. I've seen like some photographers charge like $1,000 for just a few portfolio photos. So don't overpay for your first test shoot. There's a lot of people willing to do collaborations or even you getting paid, which is fantastic. So
Right.
they should start in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that happens with photographers too, in terms of when you get first, when you first get started, in terms of gear acquisition, is always a tendency to get, okay, I will provide better images if only I had better gear. And that kind of is a slippery slope because skill and understanding of lighting and other scenarios and even your camera settings, I think will get you further than just having the best camera uh, out there, just because there's a lot more to it. So the modeling
Yeah.
is the same way. There's an art to it. The facial expressions, it just takes time to master a lot of that.
Yeah, that's also another important aspect is once you get those basic steps of getting yourself set up as a business, you also need to study. I know we all hate studying, but even modeling, even now, I study constantly, the fashion trends, what poses are, really like pretty much being used a lot, and maybe you shouldn't use them because they're used so much. So
But
you're really just studying, improving, you have practice runway walking, you're posing for cameras, that would include studio work and outside. They're very different, when working in those kind of situations. So yeah, study your heart out.
yeah, I think it applies to any profession, regardless. Like you
Yeah,
have to stay abreast of the changes, and it just change quite frequently
yeah, that's so true.
in terms of styling, in terms of what's happening on the runways. So I think it definitely gives you a leg up on the competition if you've done your homework in that regard.
Yes, always be prepared no matter what, and be prepared for everything because you can't predict what's going to happen. When you're on a commercial or a shoot or runway, each job is completely different. There's no like routine set way of how modeling works, which makes it really exciting, but also nerve-wracking at the same time.
Yeah, from a photographer's perspective, is the same way. Especially if you are shooting at a location, or you're traveling and you're shooting in a studio that is not yours. There's always going to be challenges, and part of the fun is figuring out what you're going to do to fix those problems. So
Oh yeah, all the time, every time.
yeah, for sure. I remember doing one shoot where I didn't have enough light stand in the studio, so I was literally um, using my foot to balance one thing while I was holding a reflector. Yeah, it got so interesting that the studio owner actually stepped in to help. Um, but
That's
yeah,
nice.
we got the shots we needed. I mean, looking at the images, you would not know that all that was going into it. They came out just
Yeah.
fine.
It's fantastic. You gotta wing it. That's what we say. You gotta wing it. Just go for
Yeah,
it. Do
absolutely.
whatever you can to make it work.
Absolutely. I think it's important to have a vision, and you have to be ready to do whatever it takes to execute that vision.
Yeah, I think for photographers and models alike, you have to be ready for like high, I don't know what you call it, high emotional, like stressful moments, like a model on the runway, your shoe snaps. What do? You don't throw a fit and panic, you're like, okay, act like a model still, or kick it off stage, grab it, I don't know, but you gotta keep calm and then pretty much work your way through the situation that makes you like a better person. And you also have to remember you're a role model for everybody else who's watching you. So you have to act, very like just, I don't know, good etiquette and good manners and good attitude. And I think you'll get through any situation with a good attitude.
For sure. I mean, that's almost like a nightmare situation. I hope your heels have never snapped off in public like that. So,
Nope, but I have fallen many times on the runway. Fallen. Oh yes.
yeah, that is not an occupational hazard for us, thankfully. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm thankful for that.
that's true.
I also did want to ask you about, like you mentioned, the Tokyo Fashion Week, but are there specific companies that you want to work with while you're still in Japan, or do certain events that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, so for me, I think Tokyo Fashion Week was one of my dreams to do that fashion show. So I could possibly like sacrifice the no pay just to have that experience. I'm still thinking about it. It's kind of, in the back of my mind. Otherwise, I think I would like to do more cultural, like photo shoots of like actually kimonos and yukatas and kind of really get into the Japanese culture of experiencing like wearing those clothes because they're absolutely beautiful. I have done a few photo shoots with those kind of outfits, and you wouldn't believe how many layers a kimono has. Like your back is about to break wearing them. So I would like to have more of those experiences while in Japan because I have access to them.
For sure. I think access is the big thing. They're a
Yeah,
lot more difficult to access when you're in the States. So,
exactly. Actually, authentic, Japanese culture. It's right here. It's like you gotta experience it while you're here.
right, absolutely. Have you worked with any commercial entities in Japan?
Oh yeah, actually, I have quite a few. I was really
Oh,
lucky and fortunate to work for Fuji Camera. So I did a commercial shoot for them. That was really fun with a model from France. He was very, very sweet.
mhm.
That was a nice experience. And then I recently did, this is pretty much like for the first time, I did voice acting for Sony. So my voice is in the commercial. It's
Oh,
me,
wow.
but there's no face. Yeah, so
Okay.
I am super excited. I got to do two commercials for them, and that was a really fun experience. Stressful because it's just your voice saying the same line over and over again, different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How did you get hired for the Sony gig?
So that was through my agency.
Okay.
They asked for like audition tapes of your voice. And so luckily, like a few weeks before, oh, and this is a huge tip for models, if you want to branch out towards a different category, is I have prepared at home, like by myself, just a few dialogue pieces of me talking as
Mhm.
like a voiceover audition. So I just chose a few random scripts and I went ahead and sent that to the Sony company, and they really liked how the variety I had compared to the other models who maybe didn't have much at all or anything. So being that prepared, I was able to get the commercial. So I think for modeling, you should also think about if you want to do voice acting or acting, you should also create those reels. Like you'll need like a reel for acting commercial, like a monologue or something like that to express yourself, and then also voiceover clips. So the more dynamics you have as a model, the more you can branch out to different aspects of just everything. It's really nice.
So being prepared does come in handy.
Definitely.
Cool. Um, and before we go on to the next segment, where we talk about your favorite photos, did you have any questions for me?
I do. I have a question for you. So, the really hard thing for me is how, or maybe for even beginner models, how can we reach out to photographers for a test shoot? So
Mhm.
let's say we're scrolling through Instagram, we come across this amazing photographer portfolio, and we're like, I just want to shoot with them. How do we go about approaching the photographer or even presenting a few concepts of our own to them? What do you think?
Uh, yeah, so the same thing applies to photographers reaching out to models. So I think communication is very important. So uh, properly elaborating your concept and what you're trying to accomplish is super helpful from the very beginning, especially say you're a model and you're just starting out. You can let the photographer know that hey, this is my concept. Granted, I don't have a lot of experience, but I am trying to break through, and I love the images. You can point out specific images, like if you're trying to shoot in a specific style, while incorporating your own tweaks to it. Uh, I think most photographers will respond. There's obviously going to be a few who don't. But I think it's also important that models get paid for their work. I don't think we've ever done like a free test shoot because I want everyone to be invested in the shoot, regardless of who approaches who. So, like whether that's a makeup artist or a stylist or just the model themselves, I want to make sure that everyone gets compensated and everyone has a good feeling about the shoot because I want their best work on there. So if someone's not feeling it, it's likely going to show. Uh, so in terms of reaching out, Instagram is a good idea. Model Mayhem is also like a great platform, specifically if someone's traveling, because Model Mayhem is really good about location specific items in terms of like finding photographers or makeup artists in a specific city at a specific time. You can also see travel alerts. It's not always easy to find that information on Instagram where there's a lot of images, but in terms of text and in terms of like where the model is based, where they might be traveling to, or conversely, a photographer, if where they're traveling to, that information generally is not posted, and you won't know that until they post an image of themselves in that location, and by that time might be too late to collaborate, right? So Model Mayhem, in my opinion, is a good platform for that, but I think you also mentioned the safety tips, and I think that still applies. So I would definitely check if the photographer has worked with other people, and if so, have they left reviews on their profile, and just kind of go through those. And if needed, you can reach out to one of those models and ask for their experience with that photographer, see how it went for
I
them.
always do that. Always do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're starting or, whether you have done like 20, 30 different shoots. If you want to collaborate with someone, feel free to reach out and present your ideas in a cohesive manner. And I think that's always appreciated. But
Yeah, I think
I will say from a photographer's perspective, depending on, when I started versus now, I get a lot more responses. Perhaps I have more of a portfolio to show that I can actually execute ideas and not just, start a shoot and not produce the results. So I think that part is important. So when you're starting out, be prepared for perhaps some of those rejections, but don't take it to heart. It happens to everyone.
yeah, that's true because maybe like you don't match what the photographer has in mind, which is fine. I think, maybe the clothes, like there's a certain color they need,
Hmm.
or like, a certain atmosphere that just a certain look is necessary for that
Right,
specific moment. So I
right.
really agree. I appreciate that you pay as well, because I know like some test shoots that are unpaid, you're running the risk of not receiving the photos, which could be very upsetting. You invest the like the transportation and everything, and it's still you didn't get any photos. You're like, oh, that was nice, I guess. But
Yeah, I
it
feel like the payment is
happens.
also insurance, in case that I mess up, whether, my camera really wasn't working properly that day, even though I have backups and stuff, accidents may happen, right? So
Yeah,
even if it's a test shoot and I've paid the model and I cannot produce the results, at least I can reschedule without, hard feelings. But if I promise to deliver and I'm not able to deliver, I feel I would feel really bad. It has not happened yet, and but just like insurance, you gotta be ready for like something bad happening.
yeah. I also noticed maybe you can give models some advice is when we're working with a photographer, sometimes you'll have the model's portfolio pictures, but when you go to meet the model,
Hmm.
her hair or his hair could be completely different.
Hmm.
Like everything looks like their whole entire look is very different, or they've used like a lot of heavy filters to, now, especially nowadays, like the body slimming filters, the face filters, the
Hmm.
skin smoothers. So do you think that affects your photography when the model shows up with a different look? And do you think, so two questions, do you think they should send fresh digital photos of themselves before the shoot?
I think it could be a combination of both. I think when we talk about beauty shots or fashion images, we understand that there's going to be a certain amount of editing. Not too much, as in, can you completely change the person into someone else entirely? But as you mentioned with the advent of filters, it kind of makes it difficult. But I think if you have enough images in a portfolio, you can kind of get a good idea of what the person's capable of in terms of like facial expressions, in terms of ideas, in terms of what they're comfortable doing. Because another thing is, as a photographer, and if I'm working with someone, I want to be working with somebody who's comfortable doing the shoot that they've been asked to do. So if somebody
Yeah.
who only shoots like outdoor portraits, I don't necessarily want to drag them into an indoor studio without really asking them about it. So I think that's where
True.
the collaborative part comes in. Uh, the other part that you mentioned in terms of like a recent image, uh, I think that's also a good idea because people's hair change. Um, Not in my case, per se, because I have a shaved head, but for everyone
Yeah.
else, the hair length and the hair color changes. And I think if you're going for a specific look, it's not always fair to go off on images that are 2 years old, because people do change. So I think it's important, and I've had to do that where I'm like, hey, I noticed your hair length is quite different in your past images. What is it like currently? So it's a fairly simple answer, just a quick click, and then you're all on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I've noticed that recently. Like now I send pretty much fresh digitals of like, hey, this is what I look like, this is my hair length. And always makeup artists are like, thank you so much, especially hair artists, because I have like really long, long
Yeah,
hair. They're like, thank you for telling me how long your hair is because I was not prepared. So
absolutely.
I
And
think that helps the collaborative team for sure.
for sure. And another thing in terms of like images that have not been edited, another good use for them is for a makeup artist. If they're trying to match your skin tone, um, they knew, they kind of need to know this from before, what to bring and what not to bring. So I think that part is very important. Unless you work with
Yeah.
that person before, that is.
Yeah, of course. Then they know. They know the truth.
Yeah,
The truth revealed when you get there.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
absolutely. So let's move on to the images that you kind of sent over earlier, and we will talk about them.
Okay, sure.
So first up is this. Let me know if once you see it.
I see it. Yeah, so this one was my first paid modeling shoot when I was 19. So my hair, you can probably see it's I had
Very
like
different.
fringe going on back in the day.
Yeah.
The fringe and makeup. But oh gosh, I loved these dresses. It was a lookbook for I can't remember anymore. It's been so long, I forgot the name, it just flew out. But it was a lookbook, and
Mhm.
there must have been like 30 gowns, custom made gowns that me and one other model got to wear. And I was super excited. And I remember one thing that really stood out to me. It's probably not to do with modeling, but it's kind of interesting fact is the lady asked me like, what are you? I was like, what? It's like, what do you mean? She's like, like what ethnicity? I was like, oh, I've never been asked that. Everyone just says, oh, I'm white, but I was like, oh, it's really nice. Like I'm Norwegian and Irish and German. So I feel like they were really friendly at the photo shoot. And it was nice to be able to talk before getting into these gowns and just having the best moment of my life for my first photo shoot.
Yeah, being comfortable is a very important part of any photo shoot.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So for example, like if you send me this image, if like I think your hair looks very different now. So had I based a photo shoot with that hair in mind, I would be in for a shock.
Right, exactly. So you gotta have like, especially I was 19, so it's like things are very, very different. Even body shape changes. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's always good to
absolutely.
complete.
And the next one is an advertisement, I believe.
Yes, this one is like an Alice in Wonderland. It was my first like acting in California, so it was really like nerve-wracking because I had lines. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never had lines and camera crew and drones and speakers and just like so much stuff happening all at once, like a huge production team.
Hmm.
I shot this commercial for about almost a week, and
Wow,
they hired me. Yeah, they hired me I think twice or three times about yeah. Like so, it was really nice because I realized that the people you work with can become your family. It's like this little small, I don't know, community because it's just you and the crew out in the woods doing this like random fairy tales. It was really exciting adventure.
cool. And how old were
Yeah.
you when you did this?
I think I was 21. I would say about 21.
Got it. Cool, very cool. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting image. There's a lot
Yeah, there's
happening.
commercial videos with it too.
Cool. I will definitely check those out.
Yeah, you should.
Next one is an assortment of images. I believe most of these are in Tokyo or only some.
Um, like I'd say 70% the States because it's paid work. So
Okay,
the few of the ones from Japan were also paid. These are my runway shows, or at least a lot of them that I got to experience. I think the far left one on the bottom and the far right one on the bottom, I walked twice for the designer for 2 years in Japan. So
cool.
that was for S-Mod. Yeah, so that was really exciting. That's like my first runway show in Japan, and it's pretty much same thing as America, same kind of catwalk style.
Mhm. Was it
Yeah,
interesting
super.
communicating with them with everyone else? I assume your Japanese isn't super fluent. Was it more
Uh,
challenging to do the shoot the runway versus like in the US?
so for runway, I actually have just enough Japanese to kind of grasp the concept of what they want or where I should go. Thank goodness for gestures. I think when working overseas, look for gestures because those just help you with any language. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be, even with just beginner Japanese or just saying something polite in their language. It just, that little moment opens up the whole, like everyone just becomes super friendly. If you walk in and you just give your best greeting, you'll do fine working in other countries.
Very cool.
Yeah,
And
I think
the next one.
this one. Yeah, this is the photographer I was talking about meeting in Japan. So this is the photographer I met in the park,
Oh
and
wow.
we've done a few collaborations since then. He lives really far away, so we can't do as many as I want to.
Sure.
But with him, he pretty much started my career here in Japan. So I have him to thank for bringing back the passion of, that modeling and being like, yes, I can pursue it again. And I thought I was too old coming to Japan, because of the age limit. And I was like, well, that's too bad. My career ended in the States, and then it came alive again. So I have him to thank for that.
Very cool. And I believe this is one of the images that you guys collaborated on.
Yeah. So this is our collaboration, or one of our many collaborations. So it's really fun. I can choose images and then send them to him, and then we just kind of collaborate from there and see what artwork we can make. It's really fun. I love it.
Very cool. How old were you when this was taken?
I think this was last year. So
Okay.
yeah, pretty recent. It's pretty dark. I love this style of photography. I love his style, and I'm kind of studying how to do it because I love that dark gothic kind of feel. This is the portraits I want to portray in the future.
Awesome. So this is like your inspiration for going off in that direction.
Yes, definitely.
Very nice. This is a very cool shot. I love the point of view.
Yeah, that's why I chose it. This photographer had a great eye for just random angles. He was like lying on the ground. He's like, here, get like, don't step on my face, but get close to it. So he was really willing to try just a variety. And I think that this shoot really helped me as a model grow and progress, to show, like, to learn that there's, different angles you can work with. It's not always the straight on beauty shot, but there's, you know, you can be creative. And it was really fun to have that creative freedom during a photo shoot.
Absolutely. I think images like this kind of make you think twice about how it was taken and even where it was taken. I assume this is Tokyo.
Yeah, this is the Fuji, what is it, the Fuji TV Center.
Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing if you have
Very,
time
very
to go
interesting.
there.
And next image.
Yeah, so this was an artist I worked for, and the reason I chose this photo is to show that, modeling is not always about your face. There's different kinds of models. There's hand models, leg models. In this particular picture, the artist used like my shoulder, a kneecap. There's like an arm in there. It's all completely random shots of like my ear or just completely random. And it was nice not to have that stress of holding the perfect pose or having to think of
Hmm.
an idea. I just could be myself and be natural. So I think it's good to kind of, as a model, to experiment with these kind of photo shoots and not turn them down because you're like, oh, well, that's not what I need for my portfolio. Sometimes modeling is about expressing artwork too. So not just a beautiful face,
Absolutely.
but artwork is so important in photography for sure.
Yeah, I think anything that makes you stop and think, because it made me stop. As in, what am I looking at? And how was this taken? What does it mean? There are a lot of questions, right? And these are all good questions. Even if you encountered this on Instagram, it's not something that a person will normally just scroll by. I think they're going to stop and wonder what this is. So, and
Exactly.
I think that achieves the purpose that the photographer was aiming for, at least one of the purposes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And the next one.
Oh yeah, so for this photo shoot, this was pretty recent in Japan. It's a jewelry company for Kyoto, New York, and also Tokyo. Is a pretty
Oh,
big client of mine, and the reason I chose it is because like I love feeling like a princess sometimes, and you can't really afford these luxurious items in real life, but to wear a necklace worth more than a house is pretty fantastic for a day. It's
yeah,
a
absolutely.
pretty petty reason to choose the photo, but it just everyone wants that princess moment. I think this was one of those highlights for me.
Nice. Are you still collaborating with them on other shoots?
Oh no, unfortunately, this was a one-time like campaign. There's so many photos of me, different themes. It was for the launching of their website, Instagram, and their store as well. So they don't tend
Got
to
it.
use the model twice because they want like a fresh look the next time, which makes sense. You know, you don't want the
Yeah,
model's face like on every single thing in the store. So
yeah,
unfortunately, just one day, but it was a magical day.
absolutely. Yeah, it looks fantastic, and yep, the the necklace definitely is the main highlight of the shoot.
Yeah, and I think the photographer as well, they had like pre-chosen poses that were going to be taken in one shot. Like I was supposed to hold a pose and just stay there, and then the photographer takes a picture, which is fine. That's what I gave them because as a model, you know, you want to satisfy the client. So I did that, but
Of
once
course.
I could show the photographer, you know, hey, I'm a little more experienced than that, he just wouldn't quit snapping pictures and I wouldn't quit posing. The lady, the client's like, okay, that's enough photos. He's like, no. He's like, no, working. He started going crazy. It was nice. It's nice to meet people passionate, not about the money, not about like that stuff, but about like what you're doing and passionate about your work.
Yeah, I think it's probably definitely restrictive on the commercial space where the client has a certain something in mind, but the photographer sometimes wants to push the boundaries because so it could be better than what the client envisioned. You just
Yeah,
never know, right? And that's what they're getting paid for.
so true. Yeah, so you get what you need and then you go creative after that.
Absolutely. So I had one last question for you in terms of, say, your next goals, whether that's artistic or personal, and some of the challenges that are currently facing you. Uh, what are you doing to prepare for those, and what are those actually?
That's a really good question. Yeah. So for the agencies that I applied for, so you know that was one of my goals of applying for Korea. I just recently applied for Japan again, so I want to search for possibly another agent, adding on an agent. So I've just sent my
Cool.
applications out there as well. And then I also want to apply back in the States. I think hitting up the fashion regions of New York, Los Angeles, maybe a few acting places, really just kind of like, I don't know, it's lame to say, like cast your nets in all directions pretty much. As
Sure.
the fishermen say. So I really want to do that as my personal goal. And even if I don't get chosen for any of those, I'm not going to let it stop me in pursuing my modeling, because there's always freelance and people always need models of every look, size, color. I mean, just everything, never
Absolutely.
limit yourself because of a certain standard they put on modeling. So I think that's really important for everyone to kind of learn that.
Yeah.
As for like creativity wise for my photography, again, I want to try pushing the more dark edged photo shoots and seeing what I can do with low key lighting. I love low key lighting. So I'll be trying a few of that and just really experimenting with my camera.
Absolutely. I look forward to those images. And thank you, Jocelyn, today for coming on the show. And I look forward to seeing more of your work.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And thank you for your advice too. That will really help with modeling and anyone who's interested in this career path. I think it's important to remember that just never give up, never give up on your dream and just go for it. If someone puts a limitation on you, just ignore it. That's that's their problem and then just go for it for sure.
Great advice.
Yeah, thank you so much.